Here we are with the final tank review for these Awakened tanks. Again, I reviewed all of the tanks that I own, so if the 3 tanks I don't have you were waiting for, sorry, I don't have them. But today we're going over a tank that they gave us a contract for a little while back, and most people should have now. The Tier 8 American Premium Tank Destroyer, the Roswell. This tank has a 120mm gun, and if you're aware of the balance pass that happened this season, many American 120mm guns were buffed to 420 alpha damage, and this was one of them. With that 420 alpha damage change, its reload was nerfed enough to keep the DPM basically the same, whereas most others like the E5 got a DPM buff at the same time. This one just kept its DPM it had before. With its base 10.8 seconds reload, its DPM is 2335. As this is a turreted tank destroyer, it is on par with something like the T-28 prototype, but the case-mated American tank destroyers take the cake for better DPM for the nation. The DPM here on the Roswell is pretty average though, so it's not bad at least. As for the rounds it fires, you have a standard AP round with 232mm of penetration and 1067 shell speed. This is slightly below average for tank destroyers, and doesn't get much better with its premium APCR rounds with 276mm of penetration and 1240 shell speed. This is definitely a downside of the vehicle, as a tank destroyer especially when fighting higher tiers. It doesn't have that high pen of a tank destroyer or even a heat round with pen either. It's relatively low APCR pen for a tank destroyer, so make of that what you will. It's of course usable, but you won't be able to bully tanks as well as other tier 8 tank destroyers, that's for sure. The gun handling on the tank is quite nice at the very least. With 0.34 base accuracy and a flat 2 seconds of aim time, it also has a fantastic 10 degrees of gun depression. Always a super beneficial stat to have, with maps opening up plenty for you when you have this much gun depression. But there is a downside to the gun's limitations. Although this is a turreted tank, it's not a fully traversable turret, and you can see why, with the engine deck being just as tall as the turret. It's impossible to turn 180 degrees. But you'd think you could at least still turn the turret a good amount. But you only have 30 degrees to the left and right, which is super limited given the tank's looks and width. This makes side-scraping with the tank super difficult and damn near impossible, as you don't have the angles to work well with, and the side armor only being 50mm means you really don't want to try to side-scrape in the first place. And the hull armor is not great, easily getting penned through the upper and lower hull if you're giving it up, with the lower plate being better than the upper plate, with both at this basically same angle. But since most tanks will be shooting down at your upper plate, it's the easy plate to pen, believe it or not. But if you're using that gun depression you have, the turret is fantastic, with no cupolas to shoot. The bulge of the gun, however, does create a spot for you to be penned. With the angles and using that gun depression, you make the lower ends of the sides next to the gun flatter for the enemy to pen. And since it's 230mm and relatively flat, it will be penned by premium, so be aware of that. Even if you hold down, make sure to still pull back on the reload. Its armor will work, but only if you use it to the turret's strength only. Don't brawl and act surprised when you get eaten up. You also have 1300 HP to play with, which is relatively above average, but the T-28 has 1500, but that's obviously an outlier. 1300 is on the higher ends for tier 8 tank destroyers. And you might be encouraged to drive in a battle with its speed. Its base speed isn't insane or anything, with a 35 km/h top speed. It's got 750 horsepower that gives it a pretty fair and decent 13.64 power to weight ratio. But this thing has turbo mode, which means it can go faster than that. Not by an insane amount. The turbo mode top speed raises it to 45, and that's great and does help this tank catch up to the flanks and stick with the team rather than being left behind. It's useful for sure, but I'll be honest, I rarely remember to even use it, so don't be like me and forget to utilize the turbo mode when you could. Moving on to its spotting capabilities, it is a tank destroyer, so you should expect its view range to be low and its average at 380 meters. And its camo is a decent 347 still. Truly, it's nothing special about the tank, and when using speed mode you do lose camo as well. It's nothing great, but it's nothing abysmal either. It's just tank destroyer camo and view range that's serviceable. Overall, the Roswell is just a tank that exists to me, as a cool looking tank but nothing special other than its skin. It's not doing anything above and beyond by itself, it's not top of its class in any department, and there are many tanks you'd have a better time in. And personally, there's nothing wrong with it just existing that way. It's good fun, don't get me wrong, but it's not something I'd say is a tank everyone needs, or even a tank that if it fits your playstyle you need, because there are other free texture tanks that do what this thing does, but maybe slightly better. Which is why it was great that this thing was a contract recently. And completing that contract allowed me to play it in the annual event mode that this thing does do specially, unlike those tech tree tanks. So when it awakens in the mode, it gets a special round. It does have regular rounds that do damage, but if you use its tractor beam rounds, an alien spaceship lifts the enemy you hit up into the air and deals damage over time. This also renders them almost harmless the entire time they're up there. And it does have a 5-meter blast radius that you could hit multiple tanks at once with, if they're close enough together, that is. The enemy can still fire if their tank happens to turn enough to give them a shot, but it's unlikely that they'll do anything. And when they land, they won't immediately explode, but sometimes they could still land bad and end up killing themselves in the kill feed, which could be quite frustrating if you're the tank that just off themselves uncontrollably. The beam can be stopped if the tank being lifted hits something, however, so don't shoot at tanks being sat on by arachnids and such. It's quite a strong effect, and if multiple people are playing the Roswell, then it can be actually quite a pain to be lifted into the air back to back, like what happened to me in my first ever Night Stalker game. That was not very fun. But it's pretty low HP within the mode as a trade-off for its power to annoy you, so they're quite easy to take out. If you missed out on the contract they gave for this tank, would I say it's worth spending gold on it? Because it's not in the Monster Hunter out for you to choose either. And I'd say no, but of course it's ultimately up to you. It is only 6,200 gold right now, but I think there are better tanks for the same price that you could get instead, or even tech tree tanks you could grind for that give you the same, if not a better experience than this tank, like the T-28. Of course it's entirely up to you. I really don't have much to say about this tank, honestly. Despite its connection to the Steven Alien Commander and having speed mode, I'd say it's a pretty boring tank that I'd rather be playing the T-28 instead of. And before we get to the gameplay, let's go over my loadout I used with this tank. I ran with a camo net, loader, and vents, a premium repair kit, food rations, and standard med kit. And my commander had 6 sense, rapid loading, steady aim, situational awareness, snapshot, born leader, run and gun, camo expertise, and silent driving. And here we are on Grim Graveyard. This was one of those tanks that I had to replay because when I captured the games, they were before this season, most of them. And that was obviously before the 420 alpha damage buff. So because it got buff, I decided I needed to redo it, right? Otherwise I would be showing you gameplay of it back when it had 400 alpha damage. DPM's relatively the same, basically identical. This one is 5 DPM better, now with 420 alpha damage, than previously. But it's still worthwhile for me to have gotten you another game. And there were, despite this tank being boring to me, and despite this tank being one where I have nothing really much to say about it, I had a lot of options. Like most other tanks I had decent options as well, but there was like a standout one. This one I had to really choose. I had a handful of losses where I did very well, but most of the time what it came down to, right, when choosing this one over anything else, not only did I just delete all the ones with 400 alpha damage, even if there were some good ones, but with the 420 alpha damage play sessions, we had some decent ones too, but I felt like I was fed in those games. I had one on Hell's Highway where just so many tanks drove out in the open, in the field, from the top right spawn, and just did nothing. And so I was like, even though I did more damage in that game than I'm going to do in this one felt like I had more of an impact, played more to the tank's strengths, and did more with the tank itself, other than just being fed by tanks, right? And that was kind of the way I felt about a few of the other games too that I had. So this one ultimately was chosen because it felt like I did something. There's that. So obviously we're sniping at the beginning here, because that's what you're going to want to do in the Roswell. We've already taken damage, sadly. But with Grim Graveyard, I could go forward on the ridge, right? But I have 30 degrees to the left and right turret rotation. So it would make poking the ridge very limiting. And so I'm going to snipe. Plus, there is a light tank on both teams, so hopefully ours does his job. And he is in the middle of the map trying his best. But most of our heavies are also behind me, so we're not providing much pressure in this game off the rip. I do have 2 platoon mates. One of them, or they're both in mediums, one's to my left, one's to my right. And my left guy, I believe, is trying his best to see what he can do on the one line, since our light tank's not spotting much. So far, it's just been a Bellerophon and a G-Sword that's popped up. And he has, if you see on the map there, a heavy tank walking up the one line as well. There is hard cover there, unlike regular Prokhorovka for them to utilize, so that's nice. And we're just looking for shots at this point, right? This is a bit of a, well, do we wait for them to come to us, or do we try and get to them type of situation? Our light tank really hasn't moved much, and if he's just gonna sit there and decide, all I'm gonna do this game is spot a hull down, spaced armored Bellerophon who's not over peaking and not taking damage, then he's basically useless. You see their light tank and a Batchat 25 TAP that they have. They are constantly moving. They're constantly looking for more opportunities for their teams. Ours is really not. He has moved slightly over to the right, but whatever. We do have some shots on this sharpshooter, and we did hit that Batchat earlier. But, and there he goes. You saw the Night Stalkers round to my right, and then it took a few seconds to get there. Sharpshooter's gone. Man, do I have to sneeze. I apologize. But we're just still waiting for pressure to be made that we feel like we could go up with. And it's just not happening. I mean, this G-Sword, this Batchat 25 TAP, oh, I didn't save my teammate in time, did I? I too busy looking at the G-Sword to realize that the Batchat was pushing in, and by the time I realized, he just clips out my teammate. So, but that's a good thing, getting rid of their 25 TAP, because that is one of those tanks that acts like a light tank. And if I'm not mistaken, the enemy team also has a Barask in this game too, who we haven't seen yet. So they have the much better light tanks. They have the aggressive ones, the active ones. Ours is still refusing to pop up the ridge. He's just playing on the back end, spotting whatever comes over their side of the ridge, right? Which means he's not really doing a spotting job. He's just doing a waiting to see what would be spotted by anyone else, but he's just waiting to shoot at whatever comes over. But now it looks like he's gonna rush the train track cross. Like, what is he doing? It really is baffling sometimes, the light tank players that I get on my teams. But you still make do. You still have to just work with what you got, right? Realizing how our team is all on the right side, basically. I have a Night Stalker with rockets by me, and now one heavy tank. What happened to the other one? One heavy tank behind me, a rocket sniper, and there is a tank that can see us on the left side. So this looks like an awful situation, doesn't it? I mean, it's 12 to 10, so we have the numbers advantage, but we have no map control whatsoever. And when this G-Sword gets spotted, I don't have a shot on him. So, oh, only for a second when he goes between the buildings, but that's it. So, I mean, there's really nothing much to say until something happens. This is just a waiting game, right? A waiting game for the enemy to make a mistake, and the enemy to become super aggressive, or our light tank to finally buck up and do something. He either needs to go up the one line, get rid of their G-Sword, or actually cross the ridge to spot anything further back, like that sharpshooter was. But the sharpshooter was spotted by my teammate, who's now dead because the Batchat rushed him. So, like, this is a map great for light tankers if your light tanks know how to actually utilize the map. So I decide I'm going to be the one to push forward. I decide I'll get rid of the G-Sword. I decide I'll take some hits. If it means we get some view range out there. We're still winning by 2 tanks. Now that the G-Sword's gone, though, guess who's coming up the one line with me? Hey, there we go. Come on. Go further, right? Go further. No, he's not going further. Whatever. We'll take shots at the Bellerophon. And finally, our Teeth Breaker dies. That's what he was this entire time, a Teeth Breaker. That explains it, doesn't it? I mean, that tank was given out for free, so, and you see it, you shouldn't expect much from those Teeth Breaker players, I suppose. Upsetting, though, because now we have no light tank. Like I said, I believe they have a Barask, which means they basically still have a light tank, because just like the T-114 Bat, the Barask is another class of tank, but it serves or fits the same role as the light tank, for the most part. Like, it's super stealthy, super small, good view range. Like, sure, most mediums have those sort of things, but like, the Barask really does fit a light tank role. Mantis is one of those too. But since we're not being spotted, and this Bellerophon is still poking enough for us, we've put good damage in him now, and it's 9-8, so that 2 tank lead we've had for the longest time is only 1 now, and we've done 3,000 damage, but it's still just a slow game. Surprisingly, and I didn't realize this until I put this into the editor here, this game goes on very long, doesn't it? We're already past the 6-minute mark now. And I mean 6 minutes left of the game. We have 5 minutes and 45 seconds left of this match, and it is 9-8. Their light tanks were active, but I guess just we have a lot of coverage with the Revenants and whatnot, and the enemy team wasn't far enough forward to shoot at us, and my light tank was just passive. And so when you're playing a tank destroyer and you're trying to be the back line, right, you don't want to be the forward line. It takes a while for me to make the decision myself that I'm going to be the one to do something on the one line. I'm using this bush forever now. Was really hoping the Bellerophon would get himself killed. Actually, I haven't been paying attention. I don't know if he's dead or not. But we shot at some King Dragon. This STI was poking over. We're hoping he gives me his lower plate again, and it looks like he is. And we do hit him, and then our other platoon mate who's still alive, we basically double tap that guy. He's sitting around 800 hit points, 420 and 440 alpha rounds go into his lower plate, almost simultaneously. Just instant death. Now, I knew the Bellerophon wasn't dead. I was paying attention. There he is, one shot still. Can I get rid of him? Puts it down to an 8-5. And even though it didn't look like we had map control, with an 8-5 numbers advantage and the mid-ridge basically contested, even though they have the hill, it's standard battle. Or it's team destruction, sorry, not standard battle. So we don't necessarily have to protect cap or anything. So there you go. The Barask killed our Conqueror. So there is a Barask on the enemy team still. Just nowhere to be seen. Super passive, not aggressive. He was leaving that to the light tank, and he hasn't taken that light tank's role just yet. But he did take out a Conqueror, so he's somewhere. I'm sitting here waiting for the tanks to come out the one line, because there's no way the enemy team has way more patience than me. And we're below 4 minutes left of the match. So, like, where is the enemy? I have to do something. Maybe there's nothing on the one line. But no, there's the Barask. I mean, he just killed a Conqueror, so we knew we should have known he was over here. We set him on fire with a snapshot round. Bellerophon's still alive. Barask actually did just take out our teammate, which was super unfortunate. And even though I did set him on fire, I didn't finish him off, but we were able to sneak the round in just as he turns to get away. And now we have the one line, I'm thinking, because there's no way in hell I haven't been shot at in the left when I was spotted up on the bush, and nothing has pushed in from here. So, like, did they have nothing back here? Seemingly not. So now I'm sort of behind enemy lines by myself, because my team is all on the train track still. We're less than 3 minutes left of the match. We've done 5,188 damage though. We've had a good game. It's just taken a while to do so. It's just been a lot of patience, a lot of waiting. But where's the rest of them, right? We did see one tank destroyer was spotted somewhere around the 6th line, so there is one more unaccounted for. We know the Bellerophon is still one shot. Guy is still in the game. after all this time, after all this poke, but I don't want to get shot by tank destroyer with 600 HP left and no armor. So I'm waiting for the Bellerophon to push me or to try and drive away, and maybe I spot him with these bushes, right? But again, 2 minutes left of the match. We got to do something. I'm completely alone now. My team is all together in close proximity, and I am nowhere near them. After seeing that there's a tank destroyer up on the hill, I decide, okay, it's time for me to go, right? There's the Bellerophon. Obviously we weren't the one to spot him, I don't think, but we did have the rear into him. We do get spotted when firing, and it wasn't by the Bellerophon, I don't think. And so we know that the other tank is somewhere nearby, and it was a baby waffle who was one shot. Puts a round into us. Luckily, he didn't have the 750 Alpha gun. If he did, we'd be dead. But he didn't have the 750 Alpha gun. We have 5,400 damage and 5 kills, and only now does Cone go into speed mode, and it's just too late. The other guy finally dies to my 4 teammates down there, and that was a very slow game. But we were able to snapshot tanks, we were able to hit our shots, we were able to do things, we were aggressive when we needed to, but our patience wasn't really that rewarded, but it still was in the end, because we did 5,400 damage, 1956 base XP. We definitely got an ace tanker this game. I wouldn't be showing it if we didn't, right? Cone likes his ace tankers. And you can see in the review portion, I do have the 2 marks on this tank now, but there you have it. Slow game. It is the Roswell. It's not terrible, but it's nothing like, oh, get this now, you know, like even with the creature, it's like, this is a fun tank. I would recommend it. This is just a tank. And if you have the T-28, you don't need this. Despite this being a turreted tank, again, super limited, it might as well be a casemate. Either way, thank you for watching. That's the end of our Awakened tank reviews. I hope you enjoyed it. There's plenty of more stuff that I have in the works for November, for December, for the rest of time. So if you haven't subscribed, please do. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers before the end of the year, and I would really appreciate it if we got there. Thank you for watching, and take care.